In preparing to launch a television show that would be a form of social activism, we asked lots of people to tell us the burning issue facing South Carolina. Many of you told us it's race relations. With this broadcast, we introduce a series of shows about race, primarily about relationships between black folks and white folks. We hope to be invited into churches, classrooms, and libraries to air this show and to listen to other people talk about the healing that is going on around this issue. The show you're about to see pulls no punches. Congressman Jim Clyburn and Charleston business leader Linda Ketner tell dramatic stories and throw out powerful challenges. The race dialogue at the College of Charleston gives us hope that the next generation knows how to do some healing work around this issue. I'm Pat Joe. Thank you for making the connection.
When we listen to a story and we see the world through someone else's eyes, it can help us understand them as they talk of what's important in their lives. We start breaking down those walls. We're not so different after all. We're making the connection. Making the connection.
Congressman Jim Clyburn represents the 6th District of South Carolina. He's also the House Majority Whip in the United States House of Representatives. Makes him the 3rd ranking member of the House. He is here today to talk with us about the issue of race relations in South Carolina. Congressman, thank you for being with us. Congressman, I know that you and your wife met in jail when you were involved in the civil rights movement. Can you tell us that story?
Well, at South Carolina State, I got actively involved with the early formations of what became known as SNCC. As you know, the students up at North Carolina A&T had the sit-in, I guess it was February of 1960, and of course, there have been all kinds of little things going on before that sit-in. And not long after that, a few weeks or months after that, I think it was maybe the next month, we met up at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. And a lot of us just sort of spread out in our various communities and campuses, started to challenge things. And the 7 of us who were leaders decided that it was incumbent upon us to challenge what we considered to be the real tough nut, which was the Rexall drugstore. They had a little soda fountain in that drugstore there on the square, sort of across the square from H. Crest, where the big group was going. And of course, we were arrested, and we were put in a police car and separated. And that afternoon, or later that evening, we were all being bailed out, and then they brought us all to the courthouse, and we all were in the courtroom. Then that's where we met.
What is your most painful memory around race?
The most painful thing that ever happened to me was when I was a kid. I saw my father stop at a filling station and ask for directions to a church we were going to on a Sunday evening, and I saw him being kicked. That was the most painful thing that ever happened to me.
What did he do?
What could I do?
I mean, what did he do? He just got away.
He came back to the car.
Came back to the car, got away from the assailants.
Yeah. And my mother was sitting in the car with me and my 2 brothers. Yeah. That's the most painful thing.
Remember how old you were?
Oh, I guess I was 9 or 10 years old. Wasn't a teenager yet.
Oh, those days are over, though.
No, those days are not over. They may be over in the city of Charleston or the city of Columbia, but you can't think of Jasper County, Texas, and say that they're over. They don't get the headlines now that they used to, but about every week or so, I hear of another incident about like that, but even worse. An interesting example, 2 weeks ago on my way home, I boarded a plane at Dulles Air Force Base with my security detail, which comes with the position of being majority whip. And when I got on the plane, took my seat, which is all, I always get the exit row aisle if I can get it. And it was available this time, and I was on the exit row aisle. Well, just after I sat down, my security detail sat down behind me, and the attendant came to him and says to him, he can't sit there. And he asked, why? She says, well, you go talk to the captain. He went up to talk to the captain and came back and told me that she had reported to the captain that I was violating the policy because I was a prisoner. And her prisoners are not allowed to sit on the exit row aisle. The prisoners are not allowed to be on the plane without shackles. She just assumed that this black guy getting on the plane, being escorted by a policeman or law enforcement person, it's got to be a prisoner. I don't think she would have leapt to that conclusion had I been white. So race always matters. And this happens to have been a black woman. Once again, she's the victim of her experiences.
And what were the attitudes that you got from your parents around the issues of race, around negotiating a segregated world?
Well, it's kind of interesting. And I guess one of the reasons I tend to manage pretty well within contradictions today is because I grew up in a household where there were significant contradictions on the whole issue of race. My father dealt with it one way, my mother dealt with it another. They did not deal with the race the same way. My father was much more accepting. My mother was much less tolerant of it, and she was much more of the activist than my dad was. My dad believed very strongly in the religious approach to it. My mother was much more direct, much more challenging, and she was, for instance, very, very active in NAACP. My father was always for, voting and participating and all of that. My mother was a little more for direct action and challenging.
So what's going to change things?
Well, as much as we can do to get people to learn and respect the individual differences that exist among people. Things have changed. We'll never get to utopia. Not in my lifetime, not in my grandchildren's lifetime. I think the whole issue of race and color will always be an issue on the planet Earth. Will always be. That's what I believe.
How do you feel when you hear Rush Limbaugh say that there's no racism left in America? That's a false issue.
Well, Rush Limbaugh is probably one of the most effective fanners of racism in the country. I think he has perfected the exploitation of race. If one were to study the whole issue of racism in America, you go back to that period just after Reconstruction, when Johnson took the troops out of the South, and all these creative devices were put in place in order to establish apartheid in our society. Parallel to all of that was a quiet, away from public view, a lot of well-heeled business people created a certain cloak of respectability upon groups like the Ku Klux Klan. And if you fast forward even to the Freedom Rides, everybody knows that the bloodiest day of the Freedom Rides was orchestrated by law enforcement. The riot, not the rioters, but the gangsters, I would call them, were given the green light to do what they did. They had a certain amount of time allocated to them by the law enforcement people before they would come in to stop it. Everybody knows that. Now, when you got people who are elected officials and law enforcement people orchestrating that sort of thing, that's what was allowed, and that was the method in those days. That's the same thing Rush Limbaugh does today. Same thing.
Legitimizes it.
It legitimizes it.
What's your best case scenario?
Well, it is tolerance all across the board, learning how to be tolerant of others, learning how to be tolerant of actions and thoughts. And I practice tolerance. I do.
Okay, what gives you the most hope?
I think there's the wealth makers today seem to be adopting a different attitude. For instance, Warren Buffett has declared that there is a class warfare that's taking place in our society. And he concludes that my class is winning. And that's not the way it should be. Bill Gates, both came out publicly against these unfair tax hikes for wealthy people who don't need it and didn't ask for it. 20 years ago, that never would have happened. I do believe that the global economy that is developing are going to drive Americans into each other's arms, whether they want to be there or not.
When you think about the phrase race relations, what 5 words come to your mind? Sort of a word association game we can play here.
I don't know how to add and count the words, but do unto others as you have them do unto you. I tend to use the golden rule.
That would transform race relations totally.
Yeah.
If everybody had that philosophy.
Yeah.
My first experience with racism was very, very early. I was 4 years old. It was 1954. And my grandmother, Ma, had taken me to Wars. And it was time to get some water and go to the bathroom. And we went back toward the back to go to the bathroom, and there were these 2 water fountains. And one said white, and the other one said colored. And I looked at that, because I could read. I was precocious. And I could read, and I said, "What does that mean, Ma? What is that about?" And she goes, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Does that mean that white people drink from this one, and Negroes," which was the politically correct word then, "drink from this one?" And she said, "Yeah, that's what it means. What do you think about that?" And I said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense at all, does it? What's that about?" And she says, "No." She says, "It doesn't make any sense at all. Now, what are you going to do about it?" She's asking a 4-year-old, what are you going to do about it? So this is the way she taught me, and what I did about it that day, and started a lifelong passion with trying to live our Constitution around equality was I went over and I drank from the colored water fountain and made that little statement as a 4-year-old, and made some more as I was growing up. But that's my earliest experience of how, I remember being stunned by how radically unfair. I remember after that experience, I got pretty obsessed with the whole thing and looked for it in the environment and saw it, okay? And we were sitting on the porch one day and I said, Ma, I still don't get this thing about Negroes and white people. And she said, well, let me tell you. She says, look down there in the pasture. And I said, yeah. And she says, okay, what do you see? I said, well, I see Knight and Tony and I can't remember the third horse's name, Snow. And she said, okay. She said, what color are they? I said, well, Knight's black and Tony is a chestnut and Snow's white. And she says, how do they get along? And I said, they get along great. And she said, well, Linda Ketner, just make sure you stay as smart as a horse then. Don't you be dumber than a horse in the way you live. And she taught me that kind of way, you know, simple ways.
What does racism cost us as a society?
I've thought about this. I think it costs us the same thing. It costs a family if there's a brother that's alienated from a brother. And I think it costs us the same thing as a corporation if marketing has all the resources, you know, all the toys in the backyard and production doesn't. And I think it costs us the same thing as it costs a country if they let religion divide them. I think it costs us culturally, and I think it costs us economically, and I know it costs us spiritually. And what really disturbs me most is that, you know, Thomas Jefferson and the gang did such a dandy job on offering liberty and justice and opportunity and equality for all. And America's had such a tough time implementing those ideals, just such a tough time implementing them. Martin Luther King said, he said, we've got a high blood pressure of creeds in this country and an anemia of deeds. And, you know, since I was working in the civil rights movement in the 60s and early 70s, it's gotten a lot worse, in my opinion. The anemia of deeds.
Say more about that.
I don't know the answer, but I know that the thrust of a lot of the work during the late 60s and 70s was integration, all right? And I think women were spearheading that. They were probably doing more than men, but there were lots of opportunities to get together and talk through issues and bond where we weren't before in church and socially and that sort of thing. And there was a push toward, let's figure out how to learn more about each other. I don't see any of that now, you know?
This doesn't go on?
It doesn't go on. I've seen a couple of churches like Circular or Circular Congregation or a couple of other churches, the Unitarians, make efforts in that. But in terms of the whole city or the nation, it's not even on the radar anymore. Race relations to me are probably in the worst state that they've been since I've been alive. And it's not part of the national agenda or national communication, and I don't understand that. I truly don't. I don't like it either.
What messages about race would you convey to the next generation?
I hope to God they do better than we did and do. You know, we've got a horrible legacy of dealing with race in this country. And if they look like us being the white Europeans that settled the country, we'll let them in faster, okay? We let the Irish in faster. We abused them a little bit, but then we let them in. And we let the Italians in faster because we abused them a little bit, but then we let them in. Once I was in the 2nd grade, we had moved to Salisbury, big city, and I had to ride the bus home, okay? And I'd gotten used to riding the bus home, but the city bus. And in the back of the city bus, there was this brass placard on little brass things that hung down and said, colored, okay? So I went home and I asked my dad, what is that? And he said, black Negroes are supposed to sit behind that, okay, and white people are supposed to sit in front of that. And by then I didn't have to ask why because I'd figured the whole thing out. So the next day when I rode the bus, I went to the back of the bus and sat in not my section. And what was fascinating to me is that not only did I make the white people really nervous, I made the black people really nervous, you know. I was drawing attention to it and everybody was getting upset, but the bus driver didn't catch on immediately that I was back there. And when he saw me finally, I think somebody stabbed him and said, there's a little white girl in the colored section back there. And he yelled across the whole bus and said, "Little girl, you need to move back up where you belong." And I said, "I am where I belong, sir." Thought maybe the sir would get him, but it didn't. And so he drove on a little bit. He said, "I mean it." He said, "You need to move back up where you belong." And I said, "Can't do that, sir." And he stopped the bus and he threw me off of the bus.
In the 2nd grade?
Yeah, and we had only lived in Salisbury for like, I don't know, 3 weeks. I didn't know how to get around, okay? I was panicked, I really was.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Institutional racism? Well,
Yeah.
let me give you an example, because that's the easiest way I find to understand institutional racism. Institutional racism is, a couple of the laws, and this is the good news, a lot of laws got passed from all the efforts of the 60s and the 70s, and some damn good laws, okay? Now they're, implemented differently. So there's a law against drugs, but did you know there's a separate law between cocaine and crack, which is the same thing?
Yes.
But poorer people, so it's a class issue, but it's also a race issue. And if you look at who, even with cocaine, if you look at the convictions of white people who have the same amount of drug as African Americans have, who gets the jail sentence? African Americans. Who gets off? White people. That's across the board. Almost every crime you can talk about, you'll look at the statistics, and they're equal crimes, okay? But the one going to jail is going to be the person of color. Not just African Americans. We have more African Americans in this area right now, so I think about that. So that's institutional racism, where you have put into the system a way to be a racist, okay? You found a way to systemize your racism. Another one is de facto segregation of the schools. That's institutional racism. And not only do we have schools which are largely composed of minorities now, but we don't resource them like we used to either, okay?
If you could speak, and actually you can speak, directly to our viewers and say what they can do as individual people, what would you encourage us to do as individual people to affect the issue of race?
This day, pick up the phone and call and ask one of the people you work with that's an African American, or one of the people that you know, a little bit, to lunch in your home, okay? And it's probably going to be uncomfortable for both of you because it's unusual. Do it and explain what your goals are for it, that you really want to know, another race better, and you want them to know you better, and see if they're willing to engage in that sort of experiment with you. And go to the movies together, ask your kid to invite a person of color over to spend the night. And talk with the mother about how you'd like for your child not to grow up with the racism that is so typical of the region. And would she be willing to work on it with you, or the father? In other words, start today. There's nothing that stops any of us from doing any of this. And that's how it changes.
Linda Ketner, thank you. I put it on mine too, baby. That thing slicked out.
First of all, say, really from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for coming out here tonight. I was thinking as everyone was coming in that, I always felt these dialogues were always like a sense of family, and it's been a while since we had one of these. It's been a minute since the fam's been together.
That was beautiful. That was inspiring. And that's the reason why I come back here. That's why I love to come here, because I get inspired by listening to young people open up their hearts and their minds like that. And it's not like there's a separation between the heart and the mind, okay? Great Sufi master said the mind is the surface of the heart, and the heart is the depth of the mind. They're connected to each other, all All right, so when you contaminate the surface, it filters down into the heart, and when the heart gets contaminated, it floats up to the surface. They're connected. And when I get together with students and I see in your eyes this desire to connect with each other in a real way, to really come to some understandings about yourself and about other people, that's the most inspiring thing.
Young people don't read the newspaper, but we have a really bad problem with Hispanic and blacks out there in the West. They shoot each other just to shoot each other because somebody got shot.
Greg was talking earlier tonight about how you feel the vibe in a room. I don't know about you guys, but I'm feeling this vibe and it is awesome. And everyone is so open, so honest, and I think it's just exactly what we need more of.
And I said, you know, you can be anything you want to be. You know, you just have to believe in yourself and make good grades, you know. And I think sometimes if some kids just get some positive affirmation, because a lot of them don't get positive affirmation at home, if they just get someone to sit down and talk to them and say, you know, you can do it, I know you can.
I wanted to go back to what you were saying earlier and to say to everybody else, how you said that when you saw the black guy running from the store, you thought, oh, he must have been robbing something. I just want to let you know that if I seen that too, I would have thought the same thing. And I want to let you know that you should not feel condemned because that thought comes into your head. It's your actions that define who you are.
You know, and I mean, if you need just anybody to be here, I mean, I'm sure that any one of these people actually be
To
like.
say thanks and give acknowledgement to really all the people who helped make this event possible. There's a lot of people in this room who worked very hard to make this event such a huge success.
So will you make that phone call? Will you have this conversation with a friend or neighbor or coworker of a different color? Go to our website, theconnectionshow.org, and find 3 questions we ask in this show. Send us an email in which you answer those questions. We'll put some of the answers up on our website in the coming weeks and also continue to cover this story in the months to come. Speaking of the months to come, it takes money to produce television shows. We are talking to businesses about corporate sponsorships, but so far all of our support has come from viewers. We are set to begin national distribution of the show through Free Speech Television, but we need your help. Please make a generous donation and know how much we thank you for making the connection. I'm Pat Joe.